Well, thank you, Mr. Turanosen. That was a lot of valuable information you gave us. Especially air cargo is only 1% of the whole cargo carried, but 35% of the value. Okay, right now, our first panel experts are joining us online today. The topic of discussion is the future of the air cargo industry, moderated by TAMTEKİN, who is an experienced logistic professional and master executive coach. Let me see what... Okay, welcome, Mr. Ahmed.
Hello, how are you?
I'm looking forward to hear about the future of air cargo. So the stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome for joining us from the Americas. Good day to those who are joining us from Europe and Africa. And good evening to those joining us from Asia and Australasia. My name is Ahmet TAMTEKİN. I'm the managing partner of Engage for Results consultancy company and a visiting lecturer at Catch Business School's Supply Chain Master Program. Today we will be talking about the future of air cargo, and I am joined by very distinguished guests. I will introduce them to you one by one. We have got from Singapore, JC Yip. She is the general manager of cargo logistics development at Changi Airport Group. Hi, JC, how are you?
Hello, thanks so much, Ahmed. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Turkish Cargo for having me in this very well-organized and impressive webinar.
You are more than welcome. Thank you very much. We also have Peter Pansel. I think Peter is joining us from Paris or from France. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Air Freight at Siva Logistics. Hi, Peter, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And the same, thanks for the invite. And yes, I'm based in France, but in Marseille.
Ah, okay, very good. Oh, of course, Marseille, the beautiful Marseille. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. We have got Professor Dr. Wouter de Wolf. He's the director of CMAT at University of Antwerp, Faculty of Business and Economics. Wouter, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. And a hi from a snowy Antwerp.
Oh, very good.
Thank you as well for inviting me here at this webinar. So far, I've been impressed with the setup and the organization. So well done, Turkish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have Marco. Marco, you are in, I presume, in Utrecht, in Netherlands. Marco is the managing director at Seabury Consulting. Hi, Marco.
Hi, Ahmed. And indeed, also hello from snowy Utrecht.
Ah, okay. Snow there as well. Very sunny time in Istanbul at the moment. And we have got also Dr. Cor de Man. Dr. Cor is the Senior Vice President of Cargo Sales for Turkish Cargo. Dr. Cor, how are you?
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm well. And greetings from a snowy, cold, but also sunny Amsterdam, where I'm at the offices today, enjoying a great Cargo Talks conference. And thank you very much to our esteemed guests on the panel to join in to what will be an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Very good. We will be talking about the future of air cargo, and I want to define what we mean by the future. We are not talking about the next coming years when the world will be recovering from the COVID-19 crisis, nor are we talking about 40, 50 years ahead of us when probably UFOs will doing the cargos. So we are really looking at 2030 to 2040. So 10 years from now, we will try to discuss with our distinguished guests, how will the cargo scenery look like in 10 years from now? A lot of things are happening. Regional development are differential from one region to another. Trade blocks are changing. The aircraft designs are changing. Lots of things are changing. There are things that we cannot estimate as well. So I'm all very curious about finding out what our distinguished guests are thinking about how the cargo will look like in 10 years from now. So without much ado, I will start with my first questions to Marco. Marco, can you tell me, how will the demand change in the next 10 years in terms of where will it come from, and how will the consumers with e-commerce and so forth, what are we to expect in the next 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed. And perhaps to answer that question, of course, COVID is impacting us, even for the longer term. But it's interesting to look at the long-term history in terms of, how have we grown, and what are some of the key trends that we can learn from history for the longer-term future. Now, what's interesting, I just had a look at some of our data points, and I was looking at, for example, what's happening with the US, right? So US on the transatlantic. We are basically, back at the levels from 2000. We were transporting as much cargo in 2000 as we did last year on the transatlantic both ways. So there's not much growth there, but at the same time, if we see the development of China over time, which has been tremendous, as we know. But just to give you an idea, China trades with the US, which is now the largest individual country-to-country trade flow in the world. Despite all kinds of trade barriers and obstacles, has grown 4 times as much in this 20-year time frame. So between China and US and China, we have developed enormously on that individual trade lane alone, and China in general has been doing marvelously, I would say, in terms of global air freight. Now, the big question is, how will that continue going forward? What we are currently analyzing in a lot of detail is the so-called China +1 strategy, right? So there are lots of talk around big manufacturers developing a secondary place besides China to manufacture their goods as a potential fallback. We will be analyzing that even more. We are seeing actually quite recently quite some developments in Southeast Asia, for example. Markets like Vietnam already well known, but there are other countries in Southeast Asia which are doing particularly well, and we're expecting for the longer term to becoming, also manufacturing powerhouses. Not as big as China. China will remain by far the biggest manufacturing powerhouse of the world. So hey, just to put some things into perspective, some trade lanes there hasn't been much activity, and maybe going forward, we won't expect enormous high growth rates. Some other countries, China to remain a manufacturing powerhouse of the world, but also new countries, new emerging countries coming up. So maybe with that, I'll give it back to you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you very much for this insight. And I'll ask the same question to Wouter, actually. Wouter, do you agree with Marco?
Yes, I tend to agree largely. Of course, air cargo is a derived demand. So there's no real demand for air cargo. There's demand for the goods underlying the air cargo demand. So I tend to agree with Marco. Of course, everything depends on how trade, the geopolitics will evolve. I'm personally more optimistic as well. I think there will be an open trade, maybe less nationalistic, and I fully agree with Marco that Asia will be and will remain the powerhouse within 10 years' time. Not only China, I think countries like India, Indonesia, Vietnam, watch this space, the China +1. The +1 could very often be one of these countries. You also see GDP growing there quite fast, which means there might be some additional trade, which might be some additional import coming. So I personally think that the center of gravity, which indeed, as Marco was saying, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, was between Europe and the United States. You see the center of gravity moving towards the east. So basically, I confirm what Marco is saying.
Well, very good. So we are looking at a very positive outlook and also a shift in the center of gravity of demand. That must be affecting the value chain. JC, what do you think? How will the value chain react to that?
Right. First and foremost, I agree with what Marco and Wouter has mentioned about the shift in terms of the trade flows towards the east. But I'd like to shift this discussion a bit towards consumer purchasing behavior. I'm sure my fellow panelists here would agree that we have already seen a paradigm shift in consumer purchasing behavior, more towards online shopping as well as e-commerce. So if I may bring some IATA data, so in 2020, almost a quarter of the world's population is already shopping online in one form or another. And I believe that post-COVID and in the next couple of years, and even in the longer term, this trend will continue to intensify. Now, if we look at the air freight profile and composition in recent years, we are already seeing a shift from conventional cargo to higher proportions of special cargo, including temperature-controlled shipments as well as e-commerce. Now, just to focus still a bit more on the e-commerce. So recent reports have also indicated that today, about 10% of global air cargo volumes are accounted by e-commerce, and it is projected to expand to about 20%, double by 2022. And Ahmed, to your question, it's, the next 10 years, this share will continue to rise exponentially. Now, with the increasing dominance of e-commerce in our air cargo sector, I believe that traditional models and relationships will also change. The air cargo industry will shift from conventional B2B driven business to a more consumer-centric one. So what does it mean? This means that there will be a higher demands on air cargo sector as consumers like you and I, we want our parcels to be delivered like yesterday, faster, cheaper, and with more visibility. So all these forces will certainly drive changes and will have impact on our operational processes and approaches, on technology adoption, and also infrastructure demands, both physical and digital.
Very good. Very good. Oh, this is getting more and more exciting. Big changes are looming. Thank you very much. And Peter, I mean, there is this balance between the freight forwarders and integrators. Will that be affected in the coming 10 years, you think?
Of course, it will have impact, because if the numbers of the e-commerce, and then it's also dependable how those streams will be booked and who will own that air freight capacity to flown. Because we just heard that the customers, they want to have it today, preferably yesterday, but are they always willing to pay for it? Or are the ones who are offering the logistics tell everybody that the transport is for free? And we all are in this industry, and we know that air transport is not for free. And we see also the results of a lot of carriers after COVID breakout, that the airlines are struggling because no tickets sold, and that reduced a lot of air cargo capacity via the passenger network that those carriers are operating. When you see the combination between the freight forwarder, the integrator always had their place in the market by being a solution selling vehicle. And they keep doing that. Also for them, capacity is essential. Do they have sufficient capacity to deliver the needs for the parcels that can be shipped with a certain cost element? And there you will see that there will be some shifts, of course, because the ones who control the capacity will be more and more in the driver's seat. Will it be the same when all the passenger aircrafts will come back into the market? That will be always a big discussion. Where will that shift of certain business move? Will it move back to the freight forwarder side or to the integrator side? And that's all dependable on the trade lanes and on the business that they are facilitating. Because I think with some knowledge about the capacity that was pulled out of the market, that if you see the total market pre-COVID, air cargo market uplifted by passenger aircraft, that was close to 60%. So you can imagine with all those aircrafts now on the ground and coming back into the market, but then still, as also what Turkish Airlines are doing, what they call the freighters with a P, that you will see that is from an origin to a destination. So a lot of point-to-point flying, and is not suitable with the growth we foresee and also in the e-commerce for the future. So I think bright future for the air cargo. It will continue. A lot of airlines will recognize now that cargo is an important product within the mixed carriers, because as of last year, March, they all see that cargo is generating an income flow for the carriers, and that will continue.
Very good, Peter. Thank you very much. Lots of changes happening. So, Dr. Kaur, that must also influence the cargo companies, the airlines. How will that affect their approach, you think?
Well, if I look at what we just discussed, and then given Peter's track record and insights, it is hard to disagree with him. So looking at but if we look at an air cargo company like ourselves and continue to grow and to be successful in the coming decades, it needs to focus more on the client-centric development of products and services that evolve and change with the world itself. So what is needed today may not be needed in that same way, in the same frequency or quantity tomorrow. The question we could ask ourselves, will it continue to be a derivative demand, as our esteemed guest said, or can it become a fixed value within the algorithms that increasingly support the management of global supply chain? Because we see the upcoming of the artificial intelligence there to meet the demand to deliver a package yesterday that you ordered only today. That is the ultimate dream of the e-commerce shopping. And currently, pharma and life sciences are now hot. Well, you need to keep them cool, but they are the hot topic. The vaccines, transportations, catching the public eye and interest. Yet, if I look at the past few weeks of our operations, a lot of flowers were sent across the globe to ensure the Valentines of this world can enjoy the 14th of February. So here's my tip to all listeners, and I thank everybody who's listening in to our great conference. It is this coming Sunday, so grab that opportunity to make your loved ones feel extra special on that special day. We can use some love in this crazy world of the pandemic. But no matter how fancy or well-constructed, defined and sexy products are, none would have any value if operational excellence, ease of doing business, a global network and an intertwined delivery of such through both belly and freighter is not planned with a view of the future instead of a view of the past. So supply chains increasingly are expected to deliver flawlessly on time and in full. And here, the better you do, the higher the expectations are for tomorrow. And so the focus on core competencies, commitment to excellence and client centricity are the elements that thrive when there is a culture of passion to be the best, to become the best we can be, and to drive ourselves to the point where clients up and down that supply and demand chain count on the Turkish Cargo in this case to be a given value. And to that, the upcoming opening of Smarties, the world's most advanced hub, and our ongoing investments in technology and especially our investments in human capital are testament of Turkish Cargo ambition to be that differentiator in this exciting market. So a complex answer to a complex question. We need to be prepared for that future, and looking a decade ahead, it's investment in technology, in network and in people that will help us sustain that demand.
Very good. Thank you very much. So you are stressing the importance on the operational excellence with these changes. Let me shuffle the sequence of questions and I go back to Peter again. Peter, give us an insight about how the demand and supply, the balance between demand and supply, you think will change. I mean, there was talk about the fact that demand will grow, the nature of it will change, but how will that be balanced against the supply, you think?
Let's open my crystal ball.
Yes.
Because that is the thing, and especially after the pandemic, to manage that. And again, we are still using that pre-COVID, but at the end of the day, we are now close to a year already executing the business as what we saw happening in March or slightly before March last year. No, of course it will have a big impact because capacity still is an issue. GDP in most of the countries is growing. So that means that people saved a lot of money, but they want to spend money because that's a human behavior. So a lot of companies are having discussions at the end of last year. Hopefully passenger network is coming back. So capacity is coming back. So from a shipper's perspective, when we started to have the dialogues, what will have the impact of the vaccine movements? Will it be as big as Marco and the team said in August? But also they see now that we are in 2021 that the impact was not as big as we expected mathematically in August of previous year. But it had impact in the perception on how do we procure capacity in 2021 from a freight forwarder's perspective, but also for sure from a shipper's perspective, because they were confronted with a huge increase in spend. And how do they deal with that in 2021? By creating the new budget when they have to deliver their logistics budgets for 2021. There you will see for sure that some big shippers will try to reach out to airlines themselves and trying to secure business. If they manage that capacity, yes or no, that is a different discussion. But they try to find answers from carriers if there is sufficient capacity to uplift my cargo. And you will see a huge shift that some of the bigger freight forwarders and even some niche players will start to have dedicated flights and reach out to the commercial carriers if there would be a possibility to have their own capacity in the market so that they can serve their customers as promised and on a consistent way of quality. And again, Core pinpoint out clearly, you can only be successful when your operations are on a perfect condition to deliver the needs that the market is looking for. And you need to come up with a structure that people feel comfortable when it comes to the rates. And that is proven in 2020. That was sometimes a very difficult aspect because there was not sufficient capacity in certain days or certain months of the year. And we believe that that will continue. So you need to come up with a plan. How do you serve your customers and how do you quantify that service back to the quantified offer you do to them? And that will have impact for the entire year because a third wave of COVID, we all thought the passenger network was coming back much quicker. We don't see that happening in the next few months. So still continuing in finding capacity at the right time for the right price. And that will be the discussions in the upcoming weeks, months for both freight forwarders as for the shippers.
Very good, Peter. Thank you very much. Lots of pressure on the demand patterns will change, and the supply chain behind must change as well. Marco, what do you think?
Yes, the supply chain will definitely change. We noticed last year in particular, but it's a sign of the time overall that when demand and supply are not in sync, as we tend to call it, and then strange things happen, right? And we've seen it especially last year with so much supply going out that demand and supply were really far apart, and that basically causes all kinds of major disruptions in the industry. So then. What would that mean for the longer term, right? I mean, your original question is right. Hey, for the next 10 years, what does that mean? I would tend to agree quite a bit actually with Peter that on the capacity side, even in the midterm or so, we will be seeing constraints. We are anticipating that especially the wide body belly space, doesn't return at levels of 2019 in a very short time frame. So if you know that means that this unequilibrium, if you will, between demand and supply will not be there. So that's one, capacity constraints, and that will have a major impact on how to organize things. The second one is something that JC alluded to, and I tend to call it the acceleration towards e-commerce. E-commerce trend was definitely happening. It was already growing double digits over the years before COVID. We would anticipate that to continue. But now since COVID, if you didn't have a web shop before, you better have one now, because otherwise everything's closed, right? So you see a lot of not only the big shippers and the big retailers, but also the small ones. They are now going omni-channel and making sure that selling online is a fundamental piece of your business. And so it has accelerated, and I would expect it to continue to accelerate. in many different ways, and consequently, that means how you organize your distribution changes with it, right? You don't need to go to a store anymore. You have a certain location, certain distribution center where you can basically fulfill from there, which means things towards delivery times and the like. And then the other acceleration, if you will, is around sustainability, and not so much for the transportation industry themselves, but more towards the goods that are being transported. You know, we know that we're going more into electric cars. And if you have an electric car, you need a lot more semiconductors to be able to operate that electric car compared to a traditional car. At the same time, we have seen this enormous semiconductor shortage last year, which is affecting the whole industry. It's affecting tech, it's affecting automotive, and it's affecting electric automotive, if you will. And that is also accelerating. So we're accelerating towards a sustainability platform, which means that what we are transporting by air is also changing, and the delivery times of those goods is also changing. So, you know, expect a lot more high-tech semicon parts, if you will, or related, to be flying by air out of some key markets that we've talked about before: China, Southeast Asia. So again, capacity constraints, major factor, which means differing supply chains, the acceleration of e-commerce, which will drive, you know, how we organize do our supply chains from a distribution perspective, and the acceleration of certain goods flying by air due to sustainability.
Very good. Wouter, do you agree with that?
Up to a large extent, I agree. Of course, if you look within 10 years' time, I am somewhat of a different opinion. In all the models we see is that air cargo demand, as I just said, is a derived demand. It is forecasted you will grow 2 to 4% a year. Of course, in Asia, it will grow faster than Europe and in the United States, but generally 2 to 4% in that range. And that really depends on GDP growth, on trade flows and so on. So that is for sure. On the other side, if you look at the supply, and the capacity being offered in the market is mainly passenger driven. As Peter was also saying, for the moment, indeed, we don't see any passenger flights, and it will probably take 3, 4, maybe 5 years before we're back on track. But the forecast for passengers growth is 4 to 6%. Once again, Asia on the higher side, especially India, China, Indonesia, this type of countries, they grow faster. So you may also not forget that you have more and more wide-body aircraft, which are cargo-friendly, coming onto the market. Cargo-unfriendly 747, A380s are being replaced by smaller aircraft, but which are more cargo-friendly, 787, A350, and so on. So you also have to look at the passenger flows, and in 6 to 10 years' time, you really see these passenger flows taking off again. So you really see this capacity coming back onto the market. Even faster than the cargo growth. So all the models show that we will get out of that capacity squeeze. And then, of course, you have another variable which we haven't talked about is the oil price. If the oil price remains low, which all forecasts for the moment is that the oil price will remain low over the next 5 to 10 years' time, then you will see even older aircraft, even some older freighter aircraft will be back, will remain online. So I see a capacity increase, and I increase faster than the demand for cargo, which means that the golden time which you have for the moment might disappear from depending on which side you are. So don't think about, wow, it's doing great. In 3-4 years' time, things might change, and in 10 years' time, for sure, we will have a capacity growth which is significantly higher than the cargo growth. Of course, so there's some underlying positive factors, as JC was saying. You have the e-commerce, but do not forget as well, we talk about cross-border e-commerce. In Europe and the US, we have lots of domestic e-commerce. In Asia, you have a bit more this intra-Asian cross-border e-commerce. So I tend to agree, yes, in the short term. In the midterm, yes, as well, with Marco. But in the longer term, I definitely see capacity outpacing demand. Again, a phenomenon which was already happening before COVID that will continue within 10 years' time.
Very good. I love it when there are different opinions, and then that makes a good quality webinar, I think. Thank you very much, Wouter. And we will no doubt discuss about that a little bit more.
In 10 years' time, Ahmet, we come back and you put the recording.
Time, yes. We will look at Peter's crystal ball. I think he will.
That's an important element, eh?
Very good, indeed.
Because I totally think differently about that. I don't think that the passenger aircraft will come back that rapidly. First of all the airlines who went into the COVID times, they will reduce the fleet, earlier retirement of aircraft because of costs, the cash flow situation of a lot of airlines. Then the passengers can grow. Which airlines will be then growing in which part of the world? And will that facilitate in a general growth of air freight capacity availability? I don't see that happen that quickly. So I'm slightly more pessimistic when it comes to that. So that the cargo capacity needed will be for at least the next 5, 6, 7 years being under scrutiny. Because who can afford buying those expensive aircrafts to upload those passengers and getting back the aircrafts that were already pre-COVID flying? I think they are still on the right number of aircrafts to optimize the load factors of the majority of the airlines. So I really have to see if that will happen.
Very good. Well, the way I look at it is when I see such big experts having slightly differing opinions, then I would say to the shippers, be careful and think for 2 scenarios, both of the scenarios. Capacity is outgrowing or being less than the growth of the demand. So I think it looks like there are differing opinions, which is very good. So we are not looking at the future. If we could see the future that well, 10 years ago, who would have guessed UK would be not part of European Union? Things happen. So it is. There will be different opinions, and it's very good. So I think we talked reasonable amount on the demand and the demand patterns. But what about the infrastructure? So JC, how will the future airports, cargo systems look like? I mean, Turan talked about smartest. So will that be the trend? What will the future cargo facilities look like, and airports as well?
Yeah, so if we are looking at the longer term horizon, 10 years and beyond, I'm a firm believer that the airports will continue to play an important role, if not even more important role, as an orchestrator to develop a vibrant, agile, and sustainable air cargo ecosystem in each of our air cargo hubs. So if you ask me how the future air cargo logistics park would be different from today's, couple of points. I believe that new technologies will emerge. Today, we have already seen capitalizations of machine learning, AI, the IoT, and robotics. These technologies will mature, and new technologies will emerge to further automate our cargo processing capabilities and also to enhance supply chain visibility. And earlier, Peter talked about integrators. In a few years' time, I think even now, I believe that the meaning of integrators are also being redefined. If we see e-commerce giants like Amazon and Alibaba, they are in the process of gaining full control of the entire supply chain, including air cargo capacity as well. And I also like to bring up that with the rise of the sharing economy, I think we are very used to ordering food online and ordering car rides. So with this, new operating model will also emerge. So instead of independently owned facility and services, perhaps shared facilities and services will become the new norm in the longer horizon. So just to share a bit, in Singapore, we are currently planning for our future air logistics park to be ready sometime in 2030s, alongside with our passenger Terminal 5. And with all this evolving and fast-changing supply chain trends that we just talked about, I think there are a couple of learning points that we learned along the way. I think first and foremost, while we need to plan early and try to anticipate the future, there should always be flexibility being embedded onto our master plan to allow all of us to be nimble as well as agile. And I think it's also very important that the community come together to take on a very inclusive approach when it comes to logistics park planning. There should air cargo stakeholders, both the public and private. Now, coming back to the e-commerce, right? Not only warehouse processes need to be streamlined and need to be, modernized, but not forgetting, we also need to look at every touch point of the supply chain, including cargo security, custom processes, and even border control processes. The last point that I'd like to make is that I also believe that airports, we are well placed to digitally connect the different stakeholders in the air cargo supply chain and create a very safe environment for different stakeholders to share data to enhance overall supply chain visibility. So before I pass back to you, Ahmed, I just want to reinforce that, in time to come, in fact, maybe it's happening right now already, end-to-end visibility is no longer a good to have, but it's going to be a must-have.
Must have. It will be. Yes, indeed. JC, thank you very much. Now, my attention goes more and more towards the future, and I want to imagine how it will look like. So, Dr. Kaur, what are your thoughts on that one? I want to talk about the fixed-wing drones for the future. Do you think that will be a future? I mean, that will probably give the flexibility that JC is talking about, the agile and nimble supply chain. Do you think the fixed-wing drones will be something of the future?
Well, Ahmed, thank you. This is an enticing question, and it's great to hear those different views all around the center theme. And I thank you all participants for this great discussion. And looking ahead, I actually hope we can invite you all to come and see Smartest when it's finished. And let's then continue that discussion, sitting all together in the same room and keeping our social distance. I think that would be great. But in this world, there is a lot we know, but there's a lot more that we do not know. And humanity does not even know for sure what she doesn't know. And in that light, one could say that making a prediction continues to be difficult, especially where it concerns the future. And obviously, this saying comes from Winston Churchill, referring to your Brexit remark. No one could envisage that 10 years ago. However, what we do know that there are elements that are being set in motion to make our world more connected, as JC said, end to end, both from a technological as an infrastructural point of view, and both worlds are touching each other with higher frequency and intensity. So Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and so on. And drones are an example where we see that happening more and more, and up to a point where next to fixed-wing drones for maybe the large distances, up to smaller drones for final deliveries and or express deliveries within a certain range and size, that could become a reality. And then there are some countries that say, well, that first delivery drone is already there. It's a big white bird that is delivering the newborn baby. And we could see that as a precursor to a final delivery drone throughout the world. And I noted that actually McKinsey is organizing a webinar a couple of weeks on this subject, and that further supports my theory that there is value in the deployment for particular routes, particular shipments related to drones. As for the mainstream air cargo, I don't think that drones will replace the complex orchestration of freighter embedded capacity that is interactively adapting to a constant change in demand, driven by technology, seasonality, or as we are experiencing today, the global effects of the pandemic. So drones for the future, yes. How exactly that is best applied, what is the best dimension, weight, radius, and what degrees of freedom do they need to or can be allowed to operate? All these questions that need answering, and it looks that these answers can only be gotten through trial and error. And to me, that proves again that air cargo is one of the most exciting business domains that will keep on evolving to the benefit of the world as such. I hope this provides my point of growth.
Dr. Kaur, thank you very much. I'm sort of imagining the skies full of fixed wings drones. If I don't know whether I will live to see that site as well. So you are saying yes for the future, but there are a lot of questions.
A lot of questions, and there will be restrictions because this is also to do with an unmanned vehicle, basically cruising along our air skies. We don't know what's on board. We don't know where it's going. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered on that one. And I think the first step will be for the smaller delivery drones, because that's much more controlled environment, and that will be the first step to see how and what it can be applied.
Thank you very much. Well, very interesting stuff was said in this panel. I had seen a film of Woody Allen. He was learning speed reading, and he read War and Peace, and he summarized it, saying that I think it's happening in Russia. So I will make a similar summary without going into the detail, a little bit better than Woody Allen. So what everyone is agreeing on is that there will be a great increase of demand in air cargo into the future, and that the demand will be more coming from Asia, and the center of gravity will be a little bit shifting towards Asia. And as JC said, and many of you have confirmed, e-commerce will exponentially increase, and so that will put pressure on who owns the capacity, as Peter was saying. So there will be probably more dedicated flights and so forth. And what else did we say? In the airports, whether there was a debate about whether the capacity will outgrow the demand or not. So there were differing opinions on that, and which is very good. We said that the demand patterns will change. The fact that e-commerce will increase the importance of omni-channel supply chains, and the content of what is being carried, such as semiconductors, will change. And the airports, the cargo facilities will be very nimble, very agile, and it will be there will be a lot of automation. And finally, we said that the fixed wing drones will be something in the future. We know that, but in what shape and form is yet to be decided. I have been receiving lots of questions from the audience as well. And now this is the really lottery. So let me see the first lottery is JC to you. So it says, question to JC. Airlines and airports now realize the value of cargo. Do you think that the same investment will be done to monetize the services and make it much more accessible for trade? Today, it is very restricted as airlines selling to limited number of stakeholders. So, lottery question.
I mean, if I understand the question correctly, I think the audience is asking whether airlines and airports should collaborate even more during this period to enable trade.
Yes, I think yes.
I think one of the key lessons that we learned during this pandemic is how instrumental air cargo is to not just the airport, to the aviation industry, but also to the national economy. While passenger flights are grounded, borders are closed, people can't move, but cargo still needs to move. I think especially for a very small country like Singapore, I think we are very dependent on trade. In fact, every food product that we eat is being imported, from various modes, including air as well. So I think it is very important that, despite the pandemic, that airports and airlines should work closely, not just with each other, but also with the authorities and regulators to keep air cargo supply chain open to enable trade so that essential goods like medical and food supplies will always reach the hands of patients and to citizens.
Thank you very much, JC. I also have a question here where it says, how does the panel see the future relationship between air and sea cargo providers? Who would want to raise his hand or her hand to answer this question? I see Peter is really raising the hand. I can see it. You may not see it, but I do see it. So Peter, thanks for volunteering to answer that.
No, I think it's all dependable on the cost of the products and what can the logistics spend bear when you're talking about air and ocean. We all know that uplift by ocean is much cheaper than air. Probably the last few months it's shown slightly different sometimes, but no, it's all dependable on if the product can bear. When the ownership of the product starts, are you producing your own materials? So the inventory costs it's important. So are you willing to pay for air, but become the owner of the products when it arrives at destination? Or do you produce yourself, put it into a 40-foot container and own already for 30 days when it's on the vessel, that inventory? All those costs are becoming more important. And then all the people within the shippers world, they are well organized and they know exactly what kind of models they are using. And the only thing what we are doing is trying to say to them, hey, did you thought about this? Did you thought about that? And then you have different modes. It's not only air and ocean. It's nowadays, it's even trucking out of China. It's rail out of China. It's sea air via Dubai, the traditional. But nowadays, sea air via Los Angeles, but then the port congestion in Long Beach, will that help? All those discussions, I think, on a day-to-day discussion on the shipper side as on the freight forwarder side. And then the discussion always will be which mode of transport fits our model to sell, because all those products are shipped around the world to be sold and to generate the revenue for the shippers.
Very good. Any other comments, contributions on that? I see Wouter almost leaning forward, and I don't know how to interpret that. If not, I move to another question. And Cor, this is for you, I think. Someone is asking about track and trace. They say track and trace is an issue now, and how are you planning to increase that? And I suppose JC can also comment on that as well. So what do you think about that, Cor?
Well, thank you, Ahmed. A truly interesting question. And here, if we look forward into the future, I could imagine that based on an Internet of Things setup, basically every package could have its own track and trace embedded device, where throughout the supply chain there would be points where via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, it would pinpoint itself and send a signal to whatever software is managing that track and trace supply chain. So where now track and trace is proprietary to the one who is providing the transportation service, like my esteemed colleague Peter Pencil via CEVA, via their own track and trace device. I could also see shippers organizing their own track and trace device, and then regardless of the mode of transport, always have the same. That would be my expectation in the future, but Internet of Things will drive that forward. Of course, Marco related to, oh, thank you, I see my esteemed colleague, Professor Dr. Wouter nodding, so I assume he agrees on that one. Thank you, Wouter. But Mark also said, currently we are in a supply crunch where it comes to all the processor chip necessary for that. So the actual factual rollout of such a scenario could be delayed by the current crisis. But that is what I would say.
Thank you very much. Any more contributions on this subject?
I'd like to add, Ahmed, that apart from the capacity development over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that also JC said that as well, the air cargo community building and the further digitalization. These are the two biggest challenges, I think, for the air cargo world within the 5 years to match. And these two are more like soft factors rather than hard factors. And that is linked to the track and trace challenges that air cargo currently has. That's why I think indeed that further air cargo community building, where everyone has its role, when you start to sharing data, sharing systems, connecting systems, and the further digitalization, these are two very interesting things to watch over the next 5 to 10 years.
Very good.
Yeah, if I may just weigh in my opinion. If you look at the air cargo supply chain today, it's still pretty fragmented, and there are many touch points along the way. And each stakeholder is holding to its own data, right? The airport has data, the shipper has data, the freight forwarders have data, and the airlines have data. But in my opinion, right, for us to really reach really end-to-end shipment visibility is where I think everybody needs to come together to share data. And when we talk about data, it's not sometimes it's not just about location. When it comes to temperature-controlled shipments, I think we're also very concerned about integrity of the shipment, whether there is any temperature deviation. So I think it's important that all the stakeholders come together to start collaborating and share data in a very safe environment. And I think now is the right time, because as what we all mentioned here, we have the right technology now. We have blockchain technology, we have cloud chain technology that will enable more reliable and safe data exchange.
Very good. Wow, what a beautiful debate! What a good panel! Thank you very much. Thank you very much, JC. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Marco, Dr. Kaur, and Wouter. I think that was a fascinating debate. I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much for the answers. And I hand it over to Sam. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you to all the guest speakers. There are great insights there. And now, let's